Welcome back to the channel, Bridging the Gap Student to Engineer, where professionals provide advice to students. I know that we are right before the decision day for a lot of students going into schools, so I thought I'd make a video at the last minute here focusing on tips from me and from other professionals that I've talked to, and also based on all the research I've done in making the videos for this channel over the last several months. So let's just get right into it. So we talked in the video about choosing a school, about the school selection funnel. Right now, you should be at the very, very bottom of this, where you're just trying to get yourself down from those maybe two or three that you're still looking at, and you need to decide on one to commit to so that you will attend that school. Hopefully you still don't have a large list. If you do, please go watch the video about choosing a school and some criteria that you might want to use. If you haven't already and you're still having a really, really hard time funneling that down, consider making a spreadsheet with all of the different factors and rating them for each school. Hopefully, you aren't starting this right now when you need to make a decision in the next 24 to 48 hours, but I highly recommend using a database approach if you have not done that already. So I'm going to go into the consideration slide. This slide has been on a couple other videos, and I really just am going to talk to this slide for this whole video because I tried to make some fancy graphics and nothing was really saying what I wanted to say. So I'm just going to verbally say it. So when we talk about looking for schools, narrowing down to that from that huge thousands of possibilities to that one that you're going to go to, there's a lot of things to consider. This is like when you've got a year to decide or you have 9 months. You're looking at the ideal case. If you're down to the wire and you've got a few that maybe seem like good options, or a few that seem like okay options, or maybe you have one school that you've been dreaming of, but the cost just really isn't lining up for you. I want to just provide some thoughts on all of these considerations and where you should be focusing your efforts. So I'm going to start with my thoughts from all of the schools that I've reviewed in making videos for this channel. And I've been focusing mostly on these career outcomes, looking at employers, and grad schools. It's really important to know that the school you're going to has employers that are going to be recruiting from that school. Because if you're in school and you're trying to find a job, I know people who have failed out of school or not graduated because they were so focused on getting a job. You don't want to do that. You want to have employers come to you, you show up at the job fair, and they're there. A lot of schools don't share that information, and some of it you have to like backdoor get that information. And so we've shared that on a lot of the videos here. But what is apparent after looking at a lot of schools is that while there is some difference in the income you're going to make if you're at a state flagship school versus maybe a school that's really, really not well known, and is maybe your neighborhood school that you are living in, or it's just a state school that's not the flagship. There are um, instances where you can see that there is a difference in income for those schools, but the reality is that for the vast majority of schools, if you graduate with an engineering degree in a certain discipline and you went to Berkeley, or you went to Purdue, or you went to University of Nevada, Reno, a lot of schools all over the place, you're probably going to get very similar offers. I'm not going to say that they're the same. There are some schools that are a little bit higher, but they tend to be schools where the students' first jobs are in large cities, or they are in industries that maybe pay a little bit more. You're not going to get a job right out of school that is going to make up for having $100,000 worth of debt. going to that more expensive school is not going to give you a jump on your first job so that you can pay back your student loans in a couple years. You run the risk of putting yourself into a situation where you have loads of debt and you're making decisions about paying a student loan versus buying a house, and you really don't want to get there. A lot of people from the older generation have, stories about graduating with $100,000, $200,000 in debt. Um, there is a lot of discussion at the national level about debt. You've seen debt forgiveness, all of those kind of things. There are controls in place now at the student level. So a student cannot take more than about $5,500 worth of loans a year. That means when you see schools that have data that says the average student graduates with about $25,000 in debt, that's because they can't go much higher than that. That's not because the school gives you lots of scholarships. That's not because you can hope to get that scholarship your second year. It's because it's the only debt that the federal government will allow a student to take directly without parents co-signing. So if you're looking at schools where you're thinking you're going to need to go into debt more than $5,500 a year, your parents are absolutely going to have to sign. And if they don't want to, because they don't want to put their retirement at risk, or because they don't have that kind of money, or they don't have that kind of credit, whatever the situation is, um, don't feel like they are doing you a disservice because they're not putting that out for you. More and more parents are saying no because it doesn't seem worth it in the end. Um, and you really don't want to put your parents in a situation where they are not able to retire because they have $200,000 worth of debt from your college because you wanted to go to a top name school. Um, and this is just my advice from me, from the heart, from what I've seen. So my advice right now, if you're looking at the last minute and you've got a couple schools you're looking at, look at the price and don't say things like, oh, well, we could afford it, or we could handle it. Maybe it would be a stretch, or, you know, parents and kid and everyone else would have to get a second job. Sometimes it's worth it to do those things, but most often it's not. There's a couple other things here. Forbes has some articles recently, and I'll provide that in the description for this video. But they've done a pretty small study. It's like 300 hiring managers, but the the um the attraction of the Ivies is waning. And the reason I say that is because in this study from Forbes, they asked hiring managers, are you more likely or less likely to hire students from Ivies than you were 5 years ago? And a majority of them are saying no. I'm less likely to hire from there. Kids are coming out of those Ivies entitled. They're coming out less prepared to work. There's some data that shows that schools like Harvard and Yale, 80% of the students get A's. So how do you differentiate? There's a lot of things going on in higher education where um, the fancy schools that maybe have name recognition are not necessarily going to get you a better result. The biggest example I can use in the research I've done for this channel is that UC Berkeley sounds like a great school, has a really good reputation. It is definitely a stretch for a lot of people. Even if you're in state, it is very expensive. The placement rate for engineers graduating from Berkeley is like 70%. That makes no sense to me. It's not a good number. A lot of schools have 90+%. You can go somewhere that's going to cost you a lot less money, and you're going to have a more certainty of outcome when you graduate. So those are some of the things to think about. Don't get caught up in the name of a school. Don't get caught up in, they have a good football team, or those kind of things that make it sound great. There are so many stories of kids going through their senior year, having to make those decisions, getting really upset about not being able to go to the school they wanted to, and then just loving life when they get to school. Because college is an experience, and no matter what you're doing, you have the opportunity to make friends, get involved in things, have a lot of these extracurricular experiences that we talk about here on considerations. You can make all those happen regardless of where you are. As someone who's been a hiring manager for many, many years, I also want to provide that perspective as far as choosing a school. So I've worked for companies that are global, that have a global presence and want people who are able to move all over the world. And I've worked for other companies that are much more local focused, not necessarily teeny companies, but ones that have a location and want to hire people for that. What I've observed through all of that is that companies hire local. The easiest thing for them to do and where they can have the most certainty of new employees staying because they like the local area is to hire local. So if you're wanting to be in Colorado for your future or you want to be in Texas or something like that, the best way to get there, or the quickest way, the most certain way to get a job, get an internship, get all of that, is to go to school in that area. That may not align with the rest of the things on here for consideration, so that's something you have to balance. Again, it's probably not worth going into a ton of debt to make that happen, but it is something. Um, the flip side of that is that what I have seen is that the companies I've worked for have gone local, and when I say they've gone local, they go recruit at the local schools. They don't recruit at the big name schools. They're not going and competing um, for with the Googles and the Facebooks and all the flashy companies of the day. They're going to whatever the school is that's a decent school, has an engineering program that's accredited, and they know that they can get grads there. So whether you're working for a company or looking to work for a company that's global and will give you opportunities to move all over the place, or you just want to stay at home and never move from your state or your city, um, just be aware that there are a lot of employers that partner with those local schools, and they don't really care that that the school is not highly ranked or all those other things that you're looking for when you first start looking at a school. And after all, and what I say a lot is the reason you go to school is to get that job. And if the employers are looking at those schools and they're not necessarily looking for the ones out of town, then why are you looking at all these places that you think are fancy with the fancy names? Just go with the school where the employers that you're interested in, whatever that is, are hiring. Another thing I have seen parents and students asking is, why did I work so hard for so many years in high school to end up at the state school or the local school or the school that, you would have gotten into if you hadn't done all those things? So there's a couple things with that, and I don't think that you should discredit yourself or discredit all that hard work because you decide to go to the local school. So there's a couple reasons for that. One is, if you are going to the local school with a lot of extracurriculars, really great grades, advanced placement, dual credit, all of those extra things that you've done, you're much more likely to get scholarships that are going to mean that you're going to school for free or near free. If you haven't gotten all of those things, absolutely look into it for that school that you think is below you, or however you're looking at that school. Your likelihood of getting those opportunities is higher. Also, a lot of those schools have honors programs, which will put you in a situation that may be similar to going to these higher schools where you're surrounded by people who have worked just as hard as you and had just as great results as you, and are going to be studious and are going to be fun to be around and on all of those things. So a couple things to check out with that is the honors program and scholarships related to the education there. The other big thing related to going to a school that maybe you feel like you're going to be near the top of the class, or a lot of the students are going to have lower test scores and lower GPAs than you coming in, is something that I saw on a TEDx video that I thought was very interesting, and I'll provide the link, but please go watch it yourself. And in the video, the speaker was talking about students coming into STEM programs and their likelihood of graduating in STEM based on where they are in the class. So he just used SAT scores for math. So it's very, a small piece of data. But if you look at SAT scores for math, that's a good indication of how a STEM student might perform in the future. So what he talks about in the video is that for the students that came in the top third of their class, the likelihood of them graduating with a STEM degree is about 3 times what it is for the students graduating at the bottom. And it doesn't matter what school it is. If you're going to Harvard or you're going to a local school that nobody ever heard of until you started looking for options, it doesn't matter. If you go in at the top of your class and you are in those, you get those opportunities, you are performing at or near the top of all your classes, all those things, you are much, much more likely to graduate with that degree that you set out to go get in the first place. And I think that speaks a lot to what an education at a school that doesn't seem so fancy and flashy can do for you. So think about that. Go watch that video. If there are other questions that you have about choosing a school at the last minute, if you have any questions, concerns, anything, leave a comment or a question, and we'll take a look at those and see if we can get back to you and help you out. So that's all that I have for this video. Is just really me talking about my experiences and what I've seen, both from working and from doing this channel. And I hope it's been helpful to you. Please like and subscribe. If you do have a student who's choosing to go to STEM, absolutely subscribe and have them subscribe. As we get past this season of choosing schools, I'll be doing more videos that relate to being in school. The channel already has some, so take a look at those. There's a playlist that I'll provide the link for here. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.